So let's get it started. Good morning again, and thank you so much for joining us today at the National Academy of Inventor chapter at NJIT workshop on sustainable societies. And the topic today for our workshop focus is data revolution and applications. Just to give you a little bit of background, we established the National Academy of Inventor chapter at NJIT last year, and there was a ceremony in the summer to launch this particular chapter. After that, we started a series of workshops aligning the research, innovation, and translation to market towards inventions and entrepreneurship, focus of the NJIT research enterprise for 3 grand challenges that we set aside in 2020 for NJIT research enterprise. And these 3 grand challenges coming from 5 research clusters representing NJIT big research ideas and grand challenges are healthcare innovations, sustainable societies and environment, and the data revolution and next generation cyber infrastructure. We had the first NAI NJIT workshop last year on climate change with respect to the sustainable societies and environment. And after that, earlier this year, we had the second in that particular series on healthcare innovation. So today we are meeting, and we are very proud to host the NAI NJIT workshop on sustainable societies with focus on data revolution and application, aligning ourselves to NJIT's 3 grand challenges that has high societal impact. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the program, introducing the speakers a little bit later, but this time it is my honor and privilege to invite our president, Dr. Tak Lim, to the podium to give some welcome remarks. President Lim.
Good morning. You know there's another conference going on downstairs, and I actually just found out yesterday, the Secretary of Office of Secretary of Higher Education in New Jersey is down there, so I had to go down there for a little bit. And I noticed that what they're talking about, is innovation, commercialization, and the whole bit. So we should have combined those 2 conferences together because the topic looks very similar to me. Anyway, good morning. Really, it's my great privilege. If you're from NJIT, welcome to this conference. If you're not from NJIT, welcome to campus. This is one of the most, I think, innovative and entrepreneurial campuses in America. I want to thank Atam Duan, the force behind our National Academy of Inventor progress that we have made the last couple of years. I must say that the next round of progress, is we need to populate the NAI national meeting. I was at the meeting last, was it June in Arizona, and there was only me, which is half me, because at that time I really haven't started yet. I was still president-elect, and Shivam, I think, was the other person that came. And the institution that I came from, University of Texas at Arlington, actually has, under my presidency, we push it up to having the largest number of National Academy of Inventor Fellows in all of the state of Texas. I think we're number 5 at that time, part of UTA, in terms of the number of NAI Fellows in the country. So now that I've left Texas, I'm at NJIT, I'm going to bring the playbook here and really enhance our NAI influence. Now, it's not just about accolades, it's not just about getting the numbers up there. When your numbers are up there, that means you're doing a lot of innovative and interesting work here. Innovation, as I say, is one of the most innovative entrepreneurial places, but innovation drives research. And that was actually what got us into a Carnegie R1 ranking. All of you know what Carnegie R1 is. This is the top highest research activity institution, 140 or so in the country. I'm so glad that it's not my job to get us to R1, that I'm here inheriting an institution that is already solidly R1. As Tom said, we're a young organization, but we have high aspiration. I understand that this is the third of the workshop that we did. The first one was on, I believe, sustainable environment and climate change. The second was on global healthcare, and this one is very fitting. This one is on data revolution on sustainable society. Why I say that's fitting? Because as I walk into my presidency here, again, this is my 118th day on the job. Soon I'll count in months. Now I'm counting in days still. Hopefully years then later on when I'm counting my presidency here. One of the things that we have to do well, okay, is to incorporate digital technology into every facet of this institution, in teaching, in research, in learning. That has to be the case because higher ed is going through a revolution, a digital revolution, as we speak here. And for those institutions that would flourish down the road, okay, are those that embrace digital technology in all facets of their operation. So in our plan here, as part of my priority coming in as the 9th president of NJIT, is that we need to double down on how we incorporate digital technology, how we infuse the digital world with the physical world, so that we can better serve our stakeholders. That includes our students, parents, industry, alumni, and anyone that's interested in working with NJIT. Figuratively speaking, we want to be like Amazon. If you think of Amazon, you go online and order something, you don't think of where they are physically. You order something, it shows up sometimes the same day on your doorstep, and it's the right product, not the wrong product. Now, it could be the wrong product if you order the wrong thing, but whatever you order, it shows up on your doorstep. We want to be like that in the sense, okay, what I'm saying, okay, is we want to be unbounded by space and time. If someone somewhere in this globe thinks about NJIT, they should be able to engage us at that moment in time. And there has to be some sort of response. For the faculty and staff here, I don't mean for you to work 24/7. That's not the idea. The idea is to harness technology so that we look like we're working 24/7 to the rest of the world. That has to happen. And we're putting a lot of investment in our digital strategy. That's just one thing. The other thing that why we need to do that, okay, is education today has become very, very holistic. I was just down there talking to the secretary of OSHE, the Higher Education Commission for New Jersey, and we were talking about how the pandemic had rapidly evolved what education looked like. And one of the things that emerged from that, okay, is this notion of higher education is not simply going to a classroom and getting good grades. Of course, that's very, very important. You're learning your subject matter materials in your classroom, but it has to go beyond that. And I think two things augment the education that we provide here on this campus and make it much, much more holistic. One is experiential learning. They have to engage the community on and off campus, students, I mean. And then the other one, okay, is the learning of power skills, the ability to communicate, the ability to interact in teams, understand holistically how you fit into this global network. We produce a lot of engineers here, scientists and professionals. What do? They actually go out into the world to make the world a better place to live in. They bring joy to living. So in that case, they better have empathy. That's critical. Now, all that, how does that fit into what we're talking about here? Because all that, I think, fits into the innovation and the entrepreneurial-minded culture we have at NJIT. I'm going to try to finish it up by saying that we have an organization called New Jersey Innovation Institute. I'm just going to demonstrate why we think we're innovative and entrepreneurial. Just recently, we sold a company called Biocentric. It's a cell and gene therapeutic manufacturing lab to a company in Korea called Green Cross for over $70 million. Now, why we did that, because we're not in the business of creating, we're in the business of creating companies, but not in the business of growing companies, because we're not a for-profit institution. So once it gets to the point where someone can do a better job, we get rid of it. But that demonstrates, okay, that would not happen if not because of the innovation that goes on here at NJIT. So again, I want to thank all the faculty and staff who have been instrumental in getting us here. I know the subject matter is the incorporation of data revolution on sustainable society. I won't talk much about that because it's not really my expertise, even though I have notes about that, because I'm going to leave it to the subject matter expert to talk about it. But what I wanted to do finally is to just introduce our speakers, our keynote speakers for today. I think all three of them are here, right? I see two. Yeah, okay. So let me just kind of introduce them. If I call you, just raise your hand. Elizabeth Doherty, okay. She's the Eastern Regional Outreach Director for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I think I first met you at an NAI meeting, right? Welcome to New Jersey and NJIT. And she's responsible for leading the U.S. PTO East Coast stakeholders engagement. Ms. Doherty ensures the U.S. PTO's initiatives and programs are tailored to the region's unique ecosystems of industry and stakeholders. And we look forward to continue partnership with Elizabeth on this front. So thank you for coming. Our second keynote, okay, is Michael Doyle. Michael, how are you? I don't think we've met, but I look forward to engaging you. He's an entrepreneur. I love that word. Scientist and educator who is a pioneer in cryptography, mobile AI, and web tech. He has deep experience in university industry collaboration, another favorite thing of mine, IP strategy and management, tech industry, corporate management, patent drafting and prosecution, patent enforcement and licensing, business development, and a whole host of other things that you do. Thank you so much for coming here and joining us. Our third keynote speaker is Ben Shneiderman. Is Ben here? He's going to join remotely. Okay, all right. So Ben, nice to meet you remotely. Is a distinguished university professor of computer science, founding director of the Human Computer Interaction Lab, and a member of the Institute for Advanced Computer Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. According to Google Scholar, I'm being told this, he's the most cited faculty member in Maryland. So we have, and by the way, he's also a member of the National Academy of Inventor and a fellow of NAI, National Academy of Engineering and National Academy of Inventor. So I'm really appreciative that all three of you took up time from your busy schedule to show up here and share with us your thoughts. Again, once again, my great pleasure to welcome our keynote speakers and all of you, and I wish you all have a highly productive workshop. And Atam and I are going to assure that in our next NAI national meeting, NJIT should be well represented. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Lim. I would like to extend my welcome to the first distinguished keynote speaker, Ms. Elizabeth Doherty. As mentioned, she is Eastern Regional Outreach Director for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I have very special gratitude to Elizabeth, because when we started the NAI chapter at NJIT last summer, she was the one who joined us remotely because she serves on the board of directors of National Academy of Inventors, and she has been a great supporter to NJIT. I can say that because within 5 years, the number of the NAI fellow at NJIT rose to 11 now, and the 11th edition was President Lim, who joined NJIT in July. So I'm very grateful to Elizabeth for her support and promoting the innovation, intellectual property, and the entrepreneurship, not only through her 25 years of experience working at the USPTO, but also serving on the NAI and being a spokesperson for innovation and invention translation to the market, and supporting and enhancing the United States intellectual assets. So it's my great pleasure, and please join me in welcoming Ms. Elizabeth Doherty.
Good morning, and what a warm welcome. Thank you so very, very much for that very kind welcome. It is my honor and pleasure to be here this morning. I started my morning this morning with a delightful train ride from Washington, D.C., where I sat with a delightful woman who is a DEI officer with Cisco. This remarkable young woman is blind and serves in the capacity of helping to not only bring diversity to Cisco, the company, but to make its products more accessible to the public. As we began talking about our careers during the train ride, she said to me what your real title should be, because she said Eastern Regional Outreach Director, that just seems very complicated and a very long way of confusing people. She said, your title should be knowledge engineer, because in fact, you are helping to build knowledge, and to specifically build knowledge about intellectual property. And I thought, I'm gonna have to try that on for size. I do like the sound of that, and I do think that would fit nicely on a business card. Well, again, my name is Elizabeth Doherty, and I serve as the Eastern Regional Outreach Director for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I am a 31-year veteran of the USPTO, having started my career as a patent examiner. We now have over 8,000 trained engineers and scientists that serve as patent examiners. I started with a degree in physics, and I worked in the exciting and sexy art of Class 73 measuring and testing. Torque transducers, pressure transducers, fluid flow meters, really good stuff. A great way to build a firm foundation in a career in intellectual property. So I truly appreciate and understand the work that goes into bringing an idea from the head to the hands to commercialize. And I'm excited to spend time with you here this morning. So I do have some prepared remarks, but I do also welcome questions if there's any questions along the way. So I do have to say, I am super excited about the title of today's workshop, the Workshop on Sustainable Society's Data Revolution. I love that energy and excitement, exactly. I feel like we should all be throwing a hat into the air as we embrace the revolution of technology, of data, and the marriage of those two. Before I jump into my remarks, I do want to thank all of you for your commitment to developing the leading edge of new and innovative technologies. Your knowledge, persistence, and drive to see these breakthroughs move from lab to market is truly commendable. At the USPTO, we are focused on innovation to impact. We're encouraging more innovation and commercialization from a more diverse group of inventors. Patents are the primary vehicle used by our universities, our government labs, our big companies, our startups, and individuals to turn new inventions and technologies into commercial products and entirely new industries. We must do this in all spaces of technology, from clean energy to pharmaceuticals to transportation, data processing, and beyond. It's important for the future. It's important for our country. It's important for our world. And it's reassuring to know that some of the brightest minds undertaking this are in this room today and online with us participating virtually. So while I'm here with you today, I would like to share a few stats about the importance of innovation before transitioning to a brief conversation on artificial intelligence, which I think may be of interest to you. Those in this room know better than anyone that innovation is the primary driver of the US economy. Industries based on innovation and the protection of intellectual property generate almost $8 trillion in GDP and account for 44% of all US jobs. These jobs are not only in places like Silicon Valley, but they're throughout the country, including here in the East Coast. They pay high wages and offer the best benefits. Workers in patent-intensive industries earn almost $1,900 per week. That is 97% higher than the average weekly wage of workers in non-IP intensive industries. We also know that startup companies with a patent are far more likely to be successful in raising funds than those who have not secured intellectual property protection. Let's take a quick look at Shark Tank as just one example. When used as collateral, a patent increases venture capital funding by over 75% over 3 years and increases funding from an initial public offering by 128%. Really staggering numbers. The approval of a startup's first patent application increases its employee growth by 36% over the next 5 years, and after 5 years, a new company with a patent increases its sales by a cumulative 81%, more than companies that do not have a patent. Again, these are staggering figures and clear evidence of the need for patent protection and a very good reason for all of you to look to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office as your partner. As I mentioned, the USPTO is focused on bringing innovation to impact. We want to incentivize innovation, especially in key technology areas like AI and emerging technologies. We need to promote the development and deployment of artificial intelligence and other transformative emerging technologies. As is rapidly visible, AI is already impacting most industries and many aspects of our society. It is being used to discover breakthroughs in healthcare, it is used to tackle climate change, and it is being used at the USPTO itself to help us grant robust and reliable patents in every category of technology. AI and emerging technologies have the potential to dramatically improve our day-to-day lives. They will provide countless and unpredictable benefits to our social well-being, not just here in the United States, but around the world. But bottom line, we need to get this right, and we need to partner together to do that. We need to make sure we're setting laws, policies, and practices that benefit the U.S. and the world. And in fact, in support of this effort, we stood up a new USPTO customer partnership this year. In June, we held an inaugural AI customer partnership meeting, which we invite you to attend future meetings. Our inaugural meeting featured Dr. Lynn Parker, Director of the National Artificial Intelligence Initiative Office and Deputy Chief Technology Officer of the United States. Discussion centered on important policy issues associated with subject matter eligibility, something that's near and dear to all of our inventors' hearts, and AI's increasing role in the creation of new inventions, and the development of the USPTO's AI patent data set. Let's talk about data analytics. And that's just the beginning. There's more to follow. For those of you who are not familiar with the USPTO, and I suspect that is none of you in this room, because of our focus today and our host, the National Academy of Inventors chapter here at NJIT. Our mission is written into the Constitution itself to make sure that our system of IP protection incentivizes innovation in every area of science, technology, industry, and the arts. We began our work in 1790, and again, are as old as the nation itself. Our job is to ensure that new technologies have a maximum positive impact on our country's competitiveness, on our economic prosperity, including job creation, and on our national security. Additionally, our work strives to strengthen our country's ability to solve major global challenges in collaboration with other countries. With our over 13,000-person employee base, the USPTO is on the front lines of the changes taking place in every category of technology known to exist. And what we've been observing is there is an increasing importance of AI in invention and innovation in all areas. In our recent study, we found that between the years of 2002 and 2020, annual AI patents increased by more than 150%, rising from 30,000 annually to almost 80,000 annually. And we found that there's been a broad diffusion of AI across technologies, inventors, organizations, and geography. While AI inventors tend to be concentrated, as most inventors are in large cities and well-established technology hubs, we found that AI technologies are diffusing widely across the entire country. And this is great news because it is bringing diversity to invention. For example, in Maine and South Carolina, they're leaders in applying AI to digital data processing for businesses. Inventors in Oregon are developing AI into fitness training programs and equipment. In Montana, AI is being incorporated into inventions for analyzing the chemical and physical properties of materials. Wisconsin leads the development of AI and medical instruments and processes for diagnoses, surgery, and identification, followed closely by Ohio and Kansas. And although we have a long way to go to ensure that innovation is broadly based and fully inclusive in all quarters of our nation, we should be encouraged that technologies such as AI are being adopted by innovators from across the United States. At the USPTO, we are also aligning our AI colleagues, our efforts with colleagues from across the federal enterprise. Knowing how important intellectual property is to the development of technology, we are focused on advancing the mission of the National AI Initiative to ensure continued U.S. leadership in AI research and development. We are actively addressing recommendations from the final National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence that was published in March of last year. In addition, we're collaborating with other U.S. agencies through interagency efforts. As many of you know, the USPTO often plays a lead when it comes to policies around intellectual property. And we need to, especially in this area. We need to play a lead, so we look forward to your participation. We look forward to your ideas. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on how we can play that lead and how we can help you as individual inventors, as corporations, as investors, and how we can help make sure that we're making the right decisions to advance AI in our society. At the USPTO, we've also been working to leverage AI tools to help our operational efficiency and to serve you better. We have put in place AI tools that all of our examiners can use to perform the highest quality of examination of patent and trademark applications. Just this year, we formally launched our AI system to conduct extensive searches for prior art. The result is higher quality patents that form the basis of new products, new companies, and ultimately, new industries. On the trademark side of our operations, we're developing an AI search and comparison tool for use by our examining attorneys. And for our customers, we have developed an AI-based virtual assistant that will deploy on our website to help locate otherwise hard-to-find information. We are committed to AI as a major new tool to improve all aspects of our operations, our interactions with our stakeholders, and the public. We will do this while fostering the public's trust through the responsible use of technologies. I'm going to close today with 5 very quick myths about the U.S. patent system. Myths which need to be busted, and myths which I hope are not myths that you believe in. I would also ask that you help deliver this to your invention community, whether it's here on campus, whether it's in your community, whether it's with the youth who are contemplating whether or not to join the invention innovation ecosystem. First and foremost, what I like to call the rainy day notion is that I can focus on my business now and get my patents later. The truth is, you have a limited window of time to file for a patent. So before you publish or share your idea or release a product using your idea, make sure you consult with someone about patenting. Myth number 2 is that I can't afford to get a patent. And the truth is, you can't afford not to. If you receive a patent on new technology, it provides you with 20 years of protection to invest and develop that invention for commercial gain. Without a patent, you do not have market power. You need patents to protect the investment needed to develop and commercialize your novel technology. Costs for patents to individual inventors and small entities are and can be further reduced. The USPTO has substantially reduced fees for those who qualify. We also administer a nationwide patent pro bono program to help financially disadvantaged applicants craft high-quality patent applications, submit them, and see them through examination. The patent pro bono program has already matched more than 3,400 inventors and small businesses with patent practitioners who have helped them file almost 2,000 patent applications. The third myth, do I have to have a working prototype? And the truth is, you do not. As much as I'm a fan of the historic patent models, and one that's something that was required up until the late 1880s, you do not have to have a working model. And it is certainly best to patent early, even before you make a product, because you do not want to trigger an event that will prevent you from getting a patent. That means for those of you in research laboratories, you should be talking with the technology transfer specialists who can help with patent applications and in licensing the patent. It's hard to license a new technology for further development or a commercial application without a patent. Myth number 4, I can only patent groundbreaking ideas. The truth be told, approximately 99% of patents are improvement patents. Only 1% are truly disruptive patents, things that have never been seen or heard of before. Everything new, again, 99%, is built upon current knowledge and practice. Keep in mind, the US patent system is the greatest technological repository of information that the world has ever known. And that's the beauty of our system. And last but not least, myth number 5. Because it can take a while to get a patent, then a patent doesn't have much value. The truth is, there are benefits of using the term patent pending. And having a patent pending, an application pending with the office, can help secure funding and helps keep potential competitors out of your space. The greatest overall truth is that the US patent system has been the main driver of our economy for centuries. And at the USPTO, we want it to power new technologies aimed at making our world a better place. To all of you involved in creating the next generation of technologies, you can look to the US Patent and Trademark Office as your collaborator. Your collaborator in developing your technologies into products and systems that will change the trajectory of our future. We're here to serve you, our inventors, our developers, our technology transfer and licensing officials, our entrepreneurs, and of course, our dreamers, which is where it all starts. Thank you, and keep up the great work. I look forward to the rest of the program today.
I think that our faculty and students
All right, does it work? Okay, since they are streaming live, so I have to repeat myself. As I was mentioning that our researchers, faculty, and students, they greatly appreciate the option of filing a provisional patent, which gives them it's sort of immediate response in terms of the protection, but also it gives them a little bit of the time to further explore and reach to the level of the maturity that needed in order to put together the claims for the final, patent application. This is a distinct feature for USPTO, but not for the world, protection. So how do you see the relationship? Does it help when many of the technologies today have global impact and they would like to secure the international protection rather than just the US patent?
It's a really loaded question, but it's a great question. So yes, to speak just very quickly to the provisional patent application, it's a wonderful tool, and it's a tool that many use to start bringing their invention from head to hands, to begin to try to take that next step. And it is a great lower barrier to entry into placing something on file with the office, lower cost of entry, lower level of formality. One word of caution I would have with respect to the provisional patent application is to make it as thorough as possible. I think many people have the mistaken belief that when filing a provisional patent application, it's just like writing something on the back of a napkin and throwing it into the office. We wanted to form that firm foundation for that later to be filed non-provisional patent application. So we wanted to disclose as much as possible, and even perhaps to use multiple provisional patent applications, which result in that later filed non-provisional. And let's keep in mind, by having that provisional patent application, if you then go on to pursue the non-provisional, you are in fact availing yourself of a 21-year patent, because it will go back to that earliest date of filing. But you're right, the challenge exists that patent laws across the globe are not identical. The USPTO does play a very strong role in harmonization, as well as in constant conversation with intellectual property offices across the globe. We participate most predominantly in what we call the IP5, regular meetings of the 5 largest patent offices across the globe. And we still also have meetings of the trilateral, which is the USPTO, the Japan Patent Office, and the European Patent Office. In fact, the USPTO will be the host for this year's trilateral, which we will be holding in Raleigh, North Carolina, because of a desire to feature a part of the globe, a part of the nation, which is strongly embedded in university invention, in startups, in that really energetic and exciting area of the innovation economy. We're going to have to continue to work as an intellectual property office with our global partners to try and bring about better harmonization, so inventors are not caught off guard as they do want to commercialize, as they do want to protect across the globe, because the laws and rules are so very different.
It's also very expensive with
Indeed
the international
it is.
patents.
Indeed it is. Who knows,
Right.
maybe sometime in our lifetime there will be a global patent. I don't
Yes.
know. We'll wait and see.
That would be great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you again. It was great and insightful keynote. It's my great pleasure now to introduce the next distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Michael Doyle. I have a lot to say about Mike, and I will try to keep it brief, but Mike is one of the genius and smart, visionary people that I know in my life. Mike and I met in an NIH study section, which was a special study section to review the applications for a visible human project at the NIH about 30 years ago, in 1992. And then we had a lot in common to talk about the areas of medical informatics and bringing that particular, developing the tools in order to understand the physiology and apply that to the medicine and also the education as well. So he and I worked in the biomedical and health informatics study section, which I chaired later for about 8 years. And he started working on the visible embryo project, which was, a very, very big challenge. But Mike likes big challenges because it was that particular time when people didn't know how to handle the remote server-based applications to deal with big data sets, such as the 3D data sets of the human physiology and the anatomy. But Mike took that particular challenge with respect to doing the big data analytics, data science, 3D visualization, the navigation through the 3D data sets through his visual embryo project. And then he started putting together a company, Eolus. Eolus was great in promoting the cloud computing, crypto technologies, as well as many novel ideas, which now we know that moved the whole field of the data revolution, particularly in healthcare application. Mike is an entrepreneur, a scientist, an inventor, and also a great educator. He supports all his life, even when he left the University of California, San Francisco, to start the company and do the commercialization of his innovative ideas. He kept his contact with academia through serving on the board at many universities. So it took me 10 years to get Mike to visit NJIT, and I'm so glad and so grateful that he's here. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Michael Doyle.
Thank you, Atam. It's a real pleasure being here. So my story begins in the mid-1980s. I was working as the medical illustrator for the Pritzker School of Medicine at the University of Chicago, and I decided to go back to get a PhD in anatomy and cell biology. In grad school, the lab I was working in had a sophisticated, at least for the day, image analysis system, and I decided to see if I could use it in some way to help in the histology class that I was teaching. I thought if I could find a way to make the microscopy images interactive, that I could use that as the basis for building an automated histology teaching assistant for medical students. I came up with a way to encode semantic object identity into the internal representations of image pixel data, essentially turning every image pixel into an independently addressable hotspot. This allowed me to create an early distributed hypermedia system where a small browser app could traverse links and images to related textual, image, programmatic, etc. Media, allowing the user to browse a knowledge web of virtually unlimited size. This led to my first patent application, which I submitted in 1987 and was awarded in 1989. That was the year that the first web browser was created. Another class I was involved in at the time was vertebrate embryology. A typical lab activity in the class was for the students to look at a series of sequential serial cross-sections of frog, chicken, pig embryos through a dissecting microscope and try to reconstruct and visualize in their minds the three-dimensional structure of the embryo to gain an understanding of the developing shape of the growing embryonic structures. Now, some students could do this very easily, and they probably eventually became surgeons, but most of the students found this very difficult. It occurred to me that if I could write a computer program to stack those cross-sections into a three-dimensional structure, that we'd have a valuable tool to enable all the embryology students to be able to see how the embryo structure shapes emerged and related to each other, and to study those from various vantage points. So I started a project. I got together with the course director, Maury Pescatelli, and we started working on building automated tools for computer-aided instruction in embryology. Now, our lab had just purchased this IBM's very powerful new AT computer, which we thought would be more than powerful enough for the job we had in mind. And after many months of discovering how complex the problem was that we had undertaken, and how underpowered that equipment actually was for the task at hand, I was saved by the bell. Or in this case, I was saved by being recruited to join the faculty in a newly redesigned Department of Biomedical Visualization at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I became the director of the Biomedical Visualization Lab, a campus resource for technology development and tech transfer relating to biomedical imaging and applications. One of the goals of the lab was to create a set of canonical models of anatomical structure. And around the same time, I was appointed to the oversight committee for a new project from the National Library of Medicine called the Visible Human Project. The goal of the project was to create a national resource for ultra-high resolution 3D image data of adult human anatomy. I was extremely interested in working with this kind of information, but it would be several years before any of that visible human data was going to become available. And I didn't want to wait. So I began looking for other sources of high-resolution 3D images of human anatomy. I discovered a collection at the National Museum of Health and Medicine called the Carnegie Collection of Human Embryology. The Carnegie Collection is a set of about 650 human embryos serially sectioned and mounted on slides that were stored at the museum in DC. It reminded me very much of that embryo stacking project I had attempted while in grad school. I realized that if I could come up with a way to digitize and stack those sections, I'd essentially have a set of image data comparable to 650 visible human projects. So during most of 1992, my group worked on solving various problems involved with digitizing and aligning the Carnegie embryo data. And by the summer of 1992, we were able to do a demonstration at SIGGRAPH in Chicago of an embryo volume reconstruction rendered in real time on a 64,000 processor DEC MassPar supercomputer and viewed on a Silicon Graphics Iris workstation. It was quite a step up from the IBM AT I had in grad school a few years earlier. Here's a short and unfortunately very degraded video clip from a segment that aired on CNN Headline News about that SIGGRAPH demonstration.
In the cave, you fly with a plane over Chicago or study a 7-week-old human embryo in 3 dimensions. You see things too small to ever really see, like a cholera toxin infecting a host, or too big, like a galaxy.
It looks and perception. The National Museum for Health and Medicine asked the Biomedical Visualization Department to create 3-dimensional images of its embryology slides. This visualization tool will foster new studies in human development while reducing the need for...
All right, I'll jump on. At the same time, I was interested in other ways to image that kind of data. In addition to the serially sectioned specimens of the collection, the collection also contained a number of intact embryos. So in the fall of 1992, I did a sabbatical in Urbana to work with Paul Lauterbur, who later won the 2003 Nobel Prize for inventing MRI. I worked with him on methods for microscopic MR imaging of embryo specimens. While I was there, I spent the evenings at the Espresso Royale coffee shop in Urbana writing the plan for a large multi-institutional project called the Visible Embryo Project. I found out years later I'd been working those nights only a table or two away from Mark Andreessen and Eric Bina, who were writing the first version of the Mosaic web browser in the same shop at the same time. My project was focused on making interactive 3D volume visualizations of high-resolution embryo data available over the internet. I moved to UCSF a few months later and hired one of my grad students, Chong Ang, who had created a client-server visualization system capable of remotely viewing embryo data over the net. The problem was how to make the system easy to use by scientists from wherever they were. The recently launched NCSA Mosaic web browser presented an interesting possibility for a solution. The web was quite primitive at the time. For example, here's what the Microsoft website looked like in the spring of 1994, over a year later than when we were working on this problem. Okay, the PCs of the early 90s were thousands of times less powerful than those of today, and would have no hope of being able to handle the enormous embryo data sets our site provided. So we created a distributed architecture, so a small piece of a large distributed application would run within the web page, and that would tap into vast computational server capabilities on remote systems. This is a screenshot of the running system from the 93-94 timeframe. You can see an embryo volume embedded in the web page. Two views of the data are shown. I made that by opening a second window and then using the controls to slightly rotate the embryo to create a stereo pair. And if you know how to do the stereo pair thing with your eyes, you can actually see this embryo coming in 3 dimensions out of the page. It's sort of like a poor man's augmented reality system. I presented a demonstration of the system in January of 1994 at the Virtual Reality Meets Medicine conference, and I wanted to give the attendees something that they could take with them that would demonstrate the technology. But since not everyone at the conference would be able to do the eye trick I mentioned, I also handed out dozens of small pocket-sized cardboard pop-up stereo viewers that could be used to view the 3D image. This is the best way I could think of at the time to show a dynamic visualization application was embedded in the web page, tapping into vast remote computational resources to allow something that no individual user's computer could do. I still have a few of those viewers. I even have one here. So during a break, if you're interested, I can show you the little tchotchke. But I handed these out like business cards at that conference. It was pretty cool. So here's a short piece of, so I also showed a video demonstration, and here's a short piece of that video. Again, it's a very old video and it's highly degraded, but I think you'll be able to get a grasp for what we were showing. Key to all of this is that these are embedded visualizations. We're actually creating documents that are, I guess you'd call them currently compound documents, where you have the traditional type of information, but you've also got within that document links to the raw data rather than just pictures generated from data. This allows you to tie together representations of data with the actual data themselves, as well as with notes and different kinds of descriptive textual information based on that data. Our basic objective here is really to create what we're calling a national meta center, which is going to be a computational resource for the entire nation that allows people interested in many different areas, including developmental biology, also multidimensional imaging and high-speed networking and parallel computing. All these people can access this database, and the parallel nature of the computation that's taking place is invisible to the user. They log in through a Mosaic window, and that window is giving them very high performance control of interactive visualizations of data sets. By scrolling the window, we can see that this is actually embedded within the Mosaic document. Is my mic working again? Okay, the University of California filed for several patents covering various aspects of the technology from that demonstration. This is the final patent that issued from the patent family in 2015, focusing primarily on the cloud computing aspects of the 1993 demonstrations. While the tools that we created to enable online access to the Visible Embryo Project garnered a lot of attention at the time, I took all the advantage that I could of the spotlight to evangelize about the fundamental scientific goals and potential of the project, as this, again, very degraded video clip from January of 1994 shows. During a recent demonstration of this technology at the Corporate Briefing Center at Silicon Graphics Corporation in Mountain View, California, I discussed some of the implications of this technology for researchers of human genetics. We're also looking at using these models as a basis for creating three-dimensional maps of gene expression, which is a way to correlate the findings from the Human Genome Project within a context that everybody uses. It sort of sets up a standard space within which everybody can report their findings, so that you can finally have some way of comparing studies that happen in different laboratories. You know, if you're studying the three-dimensional distribution of gene expression of a gene relating to heart development, you know, what you do now is you have a little fluorescent marker that glows under ultraviolet light, and you use confocal microscopy to build a 3D model of it. And then you say, well, it's on here, and it's on there, and it's on there, and you know, and you try to describe it in anatomical terms, but it's a qualitative description, right? Well, here there would be a standard anatomy space that people can use to describe their findings, so that they could, rather than say, yeah, we saw 5 different studies that said that this was expressed at the bifurcation of the aorta with the common carotid artery. You don't have to do it in terms of verbal descriptions. You can do it in terms of a true, measurable Cartesian coordinate system. So in the late 1990s, I worked with 3 Visible Embryo Project collaborators, Maury Pescatelli of UIC, Betsy Williams of Harvard, and George Michaels of George Mason University to design a system to enable the multidimensional mapping of gene expression within tissue morphological context, something we called spatial genomics. Our system, named SAGA for Spatial Analysis of Genomic Activity, involved the basic steps of using tissue cross-sections to generate a 3D morphological rendering of the tissue sample, subsampling the tissue along a regular grid pattern, coding each subsection sample, analyzing each sample for gene expression, and then mapping the gene expression data back onto the morphological rendering of the tissue. Various methods could be used to accomplish the tissue subsampling. The example we showed involved incising a regular grid pattern across each tissue section using a laser, and then using robotically controlled laser capture microdissection to remove each subsection sample into a coded container for expression analysis, cDNA microarrays were then used to analyze each sample for expression of all known genes. Because each sample was coded to correspond to a spatial location in the original morphological tissue model, this information could be used to spatially map the expression data back onto the model. The resultant expression annotated spatial reconstruction could then be used to elucidate biological function. We filed the first patent application on spatial genomics in July of 2000, and the patent issued in November of 2009. That patent specification described the foundation for what later became known as spatial transcriptomics and laid out a roadmap for others to follow in the future. Over 15 years passed, however, before Patrick Stahl and his collaborators in Stockholm, Sweden, picked up the technique and modified the tissue subsampling, coding, and analysis steps. And then they published a landmark 2016 paper in Science to widespread acclaim. Since then, spatial genomics has exploded in popularity and use throughout the biosciences community. And it was named Method of the Year by Nature in January of 2021. That was over 20 years after the original patent application was filed by the Visible Embryo Project team. Gene expression data was just one of many types of data that were to be integrated into the Visible Embryo Project knowledge base. This is a diagram from our 1994 NSF Digital Libraries proposal. It's the same program that funded the work at Stanford that led to the founding of Google. The system we were planning would integrate different types of data, including biological volume data, molecular structure data, and genome data, together with the scientific literature in a resource that would allow online collaboration and peer review. It also included an early version of what's now called the semantic web to facilitate searching of and linking between the various kinds of knowledge in the project. By far, the part of the project that gained the most attention was the technology platform we had invented for using the web to make it easy for anyone in the world to access these rich, powerful resources, no matter how inexpensive and low-powered their computer might be. Here's the cover from the February 1996 issue of Dr. Dobbs' Journal, where I make my case to the tech industry. And that's our browser on the cover. Big tech listened, and maybe in fact they listened a little too well. And they decided to adopt the platform technology without licensing the underlying patents. The subsequent patent infringement battles made headlines worldwide, and some of those battles are even continuing to the present day. But despite those distractions, the project continued to spawn technology breakthroughs as the team moved forward, making consistent progress towards the project's goals. From the beginning, we were interested in the idea of allowing a potentially unlimited number of remote computational engines to support the rich visualizations embedded within our site's web pages. This would mean that there could also be an unlimited number of types of dynamic content that could be embedded within those pages as well. In order to create a secure environment for executable code to be downloaded and run in the page, we created a code interpreter plugin called WebWish that used public key encryption to ensure that only authenticated program code from trusted developers could execute within the browser environment. We announced this system in a sidebar near the end of our February '96 Dr. Dobbs article. This approach is now known as code signing, and it's become the worldwide de facto standard for securing downloadable executable content on the web. By the early 2000s, the project grew to 10 sites across the country, connected by high-speed and low-latency networking, with many terabytes of data spread among the various sites. I began to become increasingly concerned about data security. In particular, I became quite concerned about the ability for users over the long term to trust the integrity of data residing within an inherently mutable environment. The problem as I saw it was that the prevailing wisdom of the day was to prove data integrity by using a trusted third-party signature authority to authenticate and validate data using that authority's private key, so that the authority's public key could be used to prove the data at a later date. But what if you can't trust that trusted authority? What if it no longer exists years later, or perhaps its systems have become corrupted, or even the people in that company have become corrupted? I wanted to come up with a way to prove data without having to trust anyone. I designed a system that makes use of transient secret keys that are used for brief time intervals or individual transactions and then are deleted. Each secret key is used to both issue timestamp tokens during its interval of use, and it's used to assign the public key for the following interval or transaction. After its interval of use expires, the secret key is deleted. This creates a forward signature chain that grows through time. The chain's then published widely to allow independent verification. The chain of interval blocks contains the public key chains as well as the chain of meta-hash timestamp data within each server. A mesh of servers then cross-certify the interval blocks as the chains grow. This widespread cross-certification creates a chain mail of cryptographic signature links, resulting in a mesh of signature chains that's been described by reviewers as strong as its strongest link. The transient key cryptography patent family contains several patents, all with a priority date going back to September of 1997. The system was adopted in 2005 into the draft ANSI standard for secure timestamps called X9.95 as one of the 5 approved methods for irrefutable timestamps. And that standard was finally approved in 2016. Here's an interesting bit of blockchain history. On the left, you can see the schematic of the transient key signature chaining algorithm from the ANSI standard document. On the right is the second page of the original 2008 Bitcoin paper, the Bitcoin white paper. If you rotate either of those diagrams 90 degrees, you'll see that those diagrams look pretty similar if you look at the details. Pretty interesting. In fact, there's a story and very likely connection there, one which I've been known to divulge if coerced with an adequate amount of Guinness, but there's not enough time for it today. But referring to connections, one of my favorite shows in the mid-90s was Connections by James Burke. It did a really great job of showing how a long and winding road of seemingly unrelated but connected events can actually lead to world-changing technologies. The story of the Visible Embryo Project is a bit like that. After taking on a project that had seemingly unachievable goals, we invented what we needed to reach those goals along the way and wound up creating a series of world-changing technologies that affect us all: the cloud, spatial genomics, blockchain, and others. So I'll leave you with this final thought. If anyone ever asks you what could chick embryos have to do with the cost of Bitcoin in China, you're all now fully prepared to say, maybe everything. Any questions? Yes. Well, actually, pretty much all of that. Yeah, the question was when the businesses started accessing and adopting those technologies, how were they getting access to it? Well, you know, in 1993, I worked at University of California. I was director of the Center for Knowledge Management, and that is the setting within which, you know, we created the first demonstrations. And I did what a good academic does. I have went all over the country evangelizing and showing off what we had created. And we did demonstrations, private demonstrations for many of these companies. And we even released our browser for use, for non-commercial use. So, you know, it was very easy for them to get access. And we were very open from the very beginning that the university had filed for patents. But this was a different time, maybe not so different, unfortunately, but, you know, it was a time where companies would see something at at a scientific conference, and they'd go back to their engineers and say, make me one of those, without much consideration to whether or not there might be patent protection for that technology. And the thought of, especially in Silicon Valley, of companies licensing their technologies from the university was pretty distant in most of the, at least more senior executives' minds. Yes.
So, first of all, wow, amazing trajectory. You took us through the time travel of the data revolution. Of course, your own visionary journey to where we are today. And a little bit another commonality between two of us, as I was sharing with you that I did on finite element methods modeling on the embryos between the week 3 and week 7 for the spinal cord keyhole fold.
Yes.
So I have fairly good idea how complex that particular problem is, and you started with that journey. And now that over that particular revolution where went through the challenges of the big data computation and another dimension of the visualization in order to understand the dynamics of the evolution of the embryos, which is just one example of discovering the secrets of life, right? To where we are today, where on one side we talked about the multi-scale modeling of the physiome project, and on the other side we look into the submolecular processes, which are the blueprints in the genomics. So from physiome to genome, when we look into the precision personalized preventive medicine, the fingerprints of that lies into connecting these two paradigms to customize and personalize in a precise way from cell and gene therapy to the behavioral, aspects of the human life, right, or human being. Where do you see we are heading to, and how the current paradigm are to be challenged for the future evolution?
Well, one of the problems has always been, and I'm a little biased because of what I just talked about, but I think one of the problems has always been that the genomic information and analysis was taken a little bit out of context, and by I think that's part of why spatial biology has suddenly exploded in popularity, because we finally have gotten to a point where we have systems that can begin to deal with the complexity, the computational complexity of trying to merge these areas into something where the context of the genomic activity is able to be studied and understood. And once you have that context, then you can start looking at interventions and treatments that are much closer to solving the various problems. So, as I see it, as moving forward, we're going to get even more multidisciplinary collaboration that pulls these various contexts together into a shared knowledge space.
Thank you so much, and with that note, we thank you again for a very inspiring talk. And talking about the multidisciplinary collaboration, and it's my great pleasure to introduce the chair and the moderator of the next panel discussion, Kamalika Sendel, another visionary person in terms of looking into the complexity of the platform in order to implement the challenges of the high-performance computing from that particular point towards the organizational challenges of managing the data and the enterprise computing development. I had the privilege of honor working with her as our CIO when she joined NJIT. And then, again, it's very hard to keep visionary people at one particular place. They just, see the platform, they see the evolution, and just wanted to do everything. And but I'm very glad and very grateful for Kamalika joining us back over here from her busy time of being a chief operating officer at another place. She is going to be introducing the panelist.
Well, it's I think you can all hear. Is someone on remote? No, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I should
So you have
speak
to
to
speak
this.
to there.
I think you can all hear me. This is coming home for me, although I haven't left home for a long time. I was here till September. And in many ways, the topic we're talking about is very near and dear to me, because one of the things that I will share is we have become data points, okay? When we walk to consumers and to businesses, what they get is data point. There is interactions that create data every step of the way, so what does it mean for us? But it's my privilege and honor to come back to NJIT. I was here, albeit for a relatively short, intense period of time, and then I ended up taking the role of Chief Operating Officer for Core Education. It's a public benefit corporation, only focusing on higher ed, small and medium-sized colleges. So my mission aspect is fulfilled, although my life got more intense. But it is my privilege and honor to introduce our panel. David Bader, our very own. David is Distinguished Professor at NJIT, and he's also the founder of our Data Science Department and Data Science Institute Director. So welcome, David. David, among other things, when I came to NJIT, David is known in the world of big data, high-performance computing. So as much as I knew what I needed to do in my role, I assure you the needle would not have moved forward without the assistance and knowledge sharing by David. So forever grateful. Thank you. Yes, what I want to do is just, well, if you want to take a seat, then we'll do some intro slides and then come back. And I'll introduce our other two panelists, Kunal Shah, Head of Global Architecture at Newmark. It's my privilege. This is the first time getting to know you and working with you, but you will see in the presentation when we talk about data and its implication, its societal implications, beyond the business implications. That's what's going to come to life in Kunal's presentation. And it is also my honor to introduce Akshay Dhawan. Akshay is Head of Corporate Development and Data Strategy at Informa. And what you will hear from him is application of data. When we say data revolution, and Elizabeth, when you shared your comments, you said we should have that. Here is what we go with it. I want that, because it is truly a time for revolution. It's everywhere. But you'll hear from Kunal. He will talk about the data revolution and its implications in pharmaceutical, clinical, and healthcare. So with that, we will start our panel. Here's how we would go. I'll share a few slides to more of a topic introduction, and then each of our panelists will have some slides, and then we'll have some questions, hopefully time permitting, and go from there. So everyone, they have your slides.
Yeah.
So
But right now, my slides are
your
up.
slides are up?
Yeah.
Okay. So Dan, we want my slides, the slide set that had my name, if you guys have that. I sent you all four together. let me start talking just so we don't lose time, okay? Dan and group, all the slides have our names beside it, so you want to bring up the set of slides that has my name first. So here was the first slide. It said the primitive era had land, the industrial era had machines, and the digital era has data. That was the first slide. And so the question is, how is this data going to change the world? And that's kind of what we're going to explore in this session. I'm trying to objectively decide if I should give this 2 minutes or keep going from my phone.
That's why we need you back at NJIT.
Right, right. And you know, for those of you who follow data, you know data is collected. There is the big data. Part of big data is impression analysis, right? So our mind is processing. My analytical side says, Kamalika, you really don't have a good way to make this decision, whether you should wait for 2 minutes or not. But there's a part of me that says, you know what? We're kind of out of time. I should keep going. So if you saw the slides, which I'm sure you'll get, what I talk about is, on the second slide, is our attitude to data has started shifting. And we have started considering data to give us the power of the known. Even when you make a decision of what not to do, you're making it with the power of the known. And even when I say, you know what, I'm just so different and unique, I don't want to follow the norm. How am I defining the norm? The power of the known. So how has, in my viewpoint, our attitude towards data started shifting? We've shifted from, we used to say data gives us competitive advantage. Every company say that. Even the casinos in Las Vegas, they said that. If you looked into how Harrow's and their data and analytics use case in 2008, it's amazing what they were able to do and how they were able to get revenue. But that's what happened. The consumer industry, the business industry, where money was made, they took that, they ran with it. But now it's shifted from competitive positioning to expectation. Again, this morning when Dr. Lim was talking about, he said, principles of Amazon. That's what we started expecting. You go there and we get price point comparisons. And you know, sometimes I wonder, I start and think, I'm always seeing some of the curated content first. How's the content curated? If I wanted to go and scroll down 6 pages of Amazon, it takes a lot of time. I'm typically not doing it. I'm typically looking for labels like bestseller, Amazon's choice. I'm typically being objective, but I'm looking at those labels, right? So, you know, there's a shift from data being used for competitive positioning to it has sort of become our expectation. If I've provided data to an organization, I sort of expect that they're smart enough to know what to do with it, that if I call back a second time, they're not going to start asking me again, what's your name, what's your phone number, and everything. That sort of by my phone number, they'll be able to bring this information. So that's a shift, right? It's not a competitive positioning anymore. It's becoming more of a norm. If you look into trends, that's what happened with banking. Most people may not want to bank at a bank that has zero digital footprint. That doesn't mean that they are going to only bank digital, but if a bank says we have no digital footprint, you usually question, why not? So it's become an expectation. Second expectation, data, I generally people are saying, you know what, I'm okay if my data can be used for common good, as long as my privacy is respected. I don't want to be stalked every time I go on web, but I'm okay. I'm okay if clinical trial data, somewhere I had participated, that is used for common good. I'm okay if some data about my health is used for some disease, ailment, cancer research, something. I'm okay with data being used for common good as long as, here we go, as long as I'm okay if data can be used for common good as long as my privacy is respected. So breathing air and generating a ton of data with every step. That's what we're all doing. We're walking data elements. Thank God the human spirit in us is very alive. But we breathe air, we generate a ton of data. Thank you. Thank you for getting the slides up. And hyper-personalization can be annoying, but it works. So here's our attitude to data, okay? technology hyper-powered itself to bring phenomenal and limitless possibilities to the table. So you will hear from our panel, edge computing, data and processing happening at the edge where decision is being made. The latency between devices, much more reduced. Network traverse paths, again, condensed. Data fabric, the fabric of data that has data storage, amazing, amazing improvements in the last 20 and 25 years. You will hear some about that. AI, I kept it small because all of you know AI, artificial intelligence. You will hear labels, responsible AI. AI is still maturing. But AI and machine learning have brought advances using data fabric, using the power of edge computing, graph databases, and quantum computing. We have limitless possibilities. We are unstoppable. But what we need to do is figure out what we want to use it for. So business world got it, right? You heard my Las Vegas casino stories and the case studies, by the way, that I read. I started American University's business analytics course, 1.5 credits, and then it became full-fledged programs over the course of 4 years. But one of the case studies we would give the students is that, a case study of how the casino uses real-time data to get the people excited and interested and at the table, like literally. Okay, so business world said, we know how to do this. There is e-commerce. Global e-commerce sales is 5.7 trillion in 2022. Predicting consumer behavior, a lot has been said about that. We're walking data, we're in a box. Someone's put us in many boxes somewhere. This has already happened. Supply chain analytics, the huge, huge potential and use of that today. Already happened. Manufacturing industry, inventory management, all of this are using it. And then when all of you would have seen, you go to and you try to pay with a credit card somewhere that you haven't paid. Happened to me every time I go to India and I try to use my credit card. Well, I always go, they should know I go to Calcutta, India, right? But so they are maturing their use of data. But fraud detection, settlement, all of these underwriting, they're using data. This happened. But now, see, we're seeing applications of data to solve much more complex problems. It is exciting what's happening in precision and agriculture and farm analytics. So the farms can have sensors, and all those sensors generate data. It takes into consideration the climate. It takes into consideration soil. There's a company, I will forget the name. I think it's called Field Matrix. It takes a piece of farmland and parses it out into almost parcels to say how to optimize and use that land. So every farmer can use that because most of it is happening in the cloud minus the sensors, right? So it just keeps growing. It just keeps growing. Tailored patient care. Healthcare and pharmaceutical world, that's where the data has truly revolutionized. Even 10 years back, see how quickly this happened. We were talking about EHR, electronic health records. And understandably, that problem hasn't been 100% resolved or 100% fulfillment hasn't come. But enough has come to take big data, the power of analytics, leverage the data fabric, leverage high-performance computing, and bring tailored patient care. The world of genomics exploded. That's, Akshay's presentation will cover some of that. I won't go into details. This one was interesting to me, identifying corruption risks in public officials. And again, you're not looking, we heard about patents this morning. We're not looking at how mature they are. But look at these use cases. Look at these use cases and battling climate change. So amazing work happening in each of these areas. And with that, I am going to request, I'll start with David. We'll bring up David Bader's slide. David's going to talk about the work we're doing here in his field and infrastructure. Here, clicker is yours.
Thank you, Kamalika. Thank you. For the presenter view on the slides, could you make the slide larger, hide the notes so that right, can you make the slide visible on the screen? So, wrong side. Thank you. So hi, I'm David Bader. I am a distinguished professor at NJIT, and I also founded the Institute for Data Science. And I'm really quite excited to talk to you today about some of the work that we're doing at NJIT and really at the confluence of high-performance computing and data science. So I've had quite a career in this area, and I want to point out just one thing on my background, that recently I received the IEEE Sidney Fernbach Award, and that was for something that I should have patented back in 1998, but I was too junior to know, where I invented Linux-based supercomputing. So commodity supercomputing that now is the dominant form of supercomputing today. In fact, every supercomputer of the top 500 use commodity-based supercomputing, and recently analysts have determined that the impact has been over $100 trillion to the world economy in the last 25 years. So had I patented, I probably could have retired many, many years ago, but instead I'm glad to be working here today. So the Institute for Data Science launched in July 2019, and we have about 40 faculty across NJIT involved with the Institute. For those of you here after lunch, there'll be presentations on the side that show off some of the highlights of our centers: the Center for Big Data, a cybersecurity research center, a medical informatics center. There's a fintech group with the School of Management, and also a brand new center for machine learning and AI. And really the hallmark of the Institute for Data Science is solving real-world challenges, challenges that impact people and society around the world. And that really is the synergy with this meeting here on looking at the data revolution, because as we've heard, data really is what drives all of our decision making and is going to be the commodity. Data is the new oil for understanding everything and how the world works. In my own research, I like to think of data on these two axes. The x-axis is objects from known objects on the left to unknown objects on the right. And I have patterns within the data from known patterns on the bottom to unknown patterns on the top. So I'm going to go through this really quickly, but in the 1980s, we had relational database technologies that let us operate when we knew everything about our data, where we could put data into schema and have tables and issue queries of known patterns and known objects. For instance, what's in your grocery cart when you check out of a store and what inventory is held by that store. On the off diagonals, on the upper left, I have known objects but unknown patterns, and this is representative of trying to find, for instance, insider threats within large organizations where an individual may trip some security lines, and then you're trying to look at what are they up to. So CISOs are very interested in this. Or in the lower right, I have a pattern, a graph motif inset that is looking at two people. They are renting a truck, they're observing a factory, they live together, and that may be a pattern important for homeland security. And then you may be trying to look for that known pattern within a sea of known or observed data. But what I'm really fascinated in is this upper right-hand quadrant that I call unknown unknowns. And in here, in this quadrant, we really don't have a lot of technology. This is where surprises happen in this fourth quadrant. And what I want to do is to be able to understand what's in this fourth quadrant of data. This is where novel cyber attacks occur. This is where novel viruses and pandemics start. This is where all of those big surprises that we didn't plan happen. And we don't know what's there, because if we did, we could have trained a machine learning model and we could have looked for it. So this is a really fascinating area. And what I want to be able to do is move all of those surprises out of this fourth quadrant into places where I know something about them. I like to think about this as graph data science, because often our data have relationships or connections. Mike Doyle gave a great talk that talked about connections, and I'm very fascinated by that. So there are problems that range from healthcare, for instance, understanding the the COVID-19 pandemic, understanding and influencing massive social networks, business intelligence, systems biology, understanding life itself, making sure that we have a resilient power grid, and also modeling and simulation up to full economic, social, political simulations of entire nations, and how, for instance, policy may impact those. So all of these types of problems are ones that require predicting and influencing change in real time and at scale. These are very, very large scale problems. And I call this exascale streaming graphs because much of this data is being collected on the edge, much of the data is in motion, and rather than having a static data set that I want to analyze forensically after something horrible has happened, what I would like to do is be able to understand data streams as they come. So edge computing combined with high-performance computing is really the way of the future. Here we have data sources from sensors and equipment, from humans, customers, and right now the best of technology brings all of this data into a centralized resource or the cloud to be able to compute on it. But we're getting to a point where the data being produced is just overwhelming, and we can no longer centralize it. We can no longer put it through all of our networks. We have to start taking our computation and pushing it out to the edge. So to the edge and back is really what the future is about. Here's just a slide of some of the work that we are working. I have my research group down here, some of our members. And we are very interested in places where, for instance, data is produced at the edge. And often those data sets may be collected to be tens of terabytes, very large data sources. And we're developing an open source framework called Arcuda that gives you the productivity of Python, being able to use NumPy and Pandas and those sorts of tools in your Jupyter notebook, but to be able to have supercomputing in the background that is working on these massive data sets. And here's an example when we collect information from the edge. Often, we don't really have ways to analyze what we're collecting. We don't know the quality of what we're collecting. And this is an example that comes from an analyst who learned Arcuda and in 5 minutes ran an analytic on tens of terabytes of data and discovered that the collection was missing parts every, the top 15 minutes of every hour. They found periodicity in the data set that was unexpected, and it turned out for years this data was just being lost because of an unfortunate error that could have been corrected. But using tools that we've helped design like Arcuda, we could find that out with a data scientist who was able to do that query in just 5 minutes. And then going from the edge to back, what we'd like to be able to do is do learning at a massive scale and be able to push models out to the edge. So at the edge, we can do better filtering, better classification, or better understanding of what information is out in the Internet of Things and on our sensors and our collection devices. So this is really the way of the future, how to do streaming, processing within networks, and how to really bring understanding to the massive data sets that are out there. It's this confluence of high-performance computing and data science at this large scale, and also democratizing data science. We have to have equity so that anywhere, any person around the planet is able to access these data sources and to be able to ask queries about the data and to do so productively and with high performance. This Arcuda framework we're in the midst of developing, and there's an area called Arachne. Arcuda is the Greek word for spider. Arachne is, sorry, Arcuda is the Greek word for bear. Arcuda is the Greek, let me stop, I'm going too fast. Arcuda is the Greek word for bear. Arachne is the Greek word for spider. And we're building out graph analytics at scale beyond enterprise solutions. What we'd like to be able to do and make this open source and available with our group at New Jersey Institute of Technology is to democratize large-scale data science, to have anyone who wants to run graph analytic queries at this scale of tens of terabytes to be able to do so quite efficiently. So again, the future is all about combining productivity and performance. Here we're using Python for productivity and the HP Chapel compiler, which has been designed over 20 years as a very productive framework on the back end. So all of this code stack is open source as well. So I'd like to thank you. I look forward to this panel discussion. And again, data science and high-performance computing are at the right time right now to really have a huge influence on our daily lives and for solving global grand challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It is my privilege now to have Akshay Dhawan come and speak to us about clinical pharmaceutical data sets and challenges and how we are resolving some of them. So, Akshay, stage is yours.
All right, thank you very much for having me. So I work at a company called Sightline. We essentially work in the healthcare data space. What I've done throughout my career and at this company is I've aggregated extremely large-scale data sets, healthcare data sets for research. The one that we've built at our company that we have today is around 400 million lives of data. So what do I mean when I say lives? I mean patient lives. This is de-identified data. It's data that doesn't have PHI, so it's complying with global regulations. It includes patients' diagnoses. So for example, did they have multiple myeloma? Did they have hypertension? The dates that they had it. It includes procedures, it includes medications, it includes lab values, demographics, race. It includes information about their providers. So in other words, what were all the different physicians and organizations that a patient saw throughout the year. And we have this for about 7 years. So we have a data set that we've amassed through different sources across the market. This industry has been in development for quite some time, really going back to the 1950s, back when IMS Health, who was originally doing marketing campaigns on behalf of pharmaceutical companies, needed data in order to prove that their campaigns were successful. They went around to pharmacies and paid them for their prescription data. And that industry has evolved since the 50s to where we are today to include much more different types of data than just prescription. Now includes EMR data, genomics data, pathology reports, imaging data. So all of that we're bringing together into one infrastructure, one standard data model, and we're connecting it to pharmaceutical companies. So our customers are actually pharmaceutical companies and contract research organizations who have a very specific problem. Their problem is that they can't recruit patients and investigators for their clinical trials. Now, clinical trials, as you might know, are a process that takes many years for an investigational new therapy to come to the market. And one really critical component of that is needing patients who have a particular set of criteria to be enrolled into a clinical trial to try this investigational agent. So one of the key problems pharmaceutical companies have is for particularly rare diseases where, for example, there may only be 10,000 people in the US who have this disease in a nation of 330 million. How do you find those 10,000 people, many of whom aren't actually properly diagnosed, many of whom don't engage with news and media sources in common ways that some of us do? So how do you find these people? So we've put together a data set at such a scale that even if it's only 10,000 people in the US, we can at least see some portion of them and we can connect them to their providers and then connect the pharmaceutical companies to those physicians to enroll those patients. Okay, so what are the key challenges to that problem? Obviously, there's a lot of challenges to making that happen, but the first one is data scale. In the example I just mentioned, having 10,000 patients in the US, you need something extremely large in order to, after you apply all the criteria of a clinical trial, find those patients who might fit a particular trial. So a trial may have 20 inclusion and exclusion criteria, It may have criteria like in the past 6 months they haven't taken a certain type of therapy. They shouldn't have these other comorbidities like certain liver issues, or perhaps they should be able to consent and read and have certain educational requirements. So all of these criteria applied under this data set. You need to have an extremely large data set in order to get pinpoint to the right patient. The second one is obviously privacy. This is a huge issue that is core to healthcare data. So around the world, we comply with, in the US, HIPAA, in the EU, GDPR, and each country has its own versions of these laws. So I'll show you in a few slides how we've produced some solutions to address privacy preservation. And then the third being data quality. At a data set of this size, 400 million lives, even the smallest errors are magnified. So I'll produce some examples of how certain data elements, which at a small scale only errors occur frequently, become very magnified in our data set. Okay, it works, it's just delayed. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so data scale. So how have we built the data set that we have today? So we have two different types of data. The first is de-identified data. So this is data that's coming through, in most cases, insurance claims. When you visit a provider, an insurance claim is registered, it's de-identified. It passes through what's called a clearinghouse, which is a type of entity that processes claims on behalf of providers or healthcare organizations and insurance companies. This data is then routed through various channels, and we aggregate it to the extent that we have around 300 million lives in the US of medical and prescription claims data. So this includes diagnoses, procedures, medications, et cetera. And then what we do is we tokenize the data. So even though there's no protected health information, even though the name, the address isn't in there, there's a common token for each person that's unique to that person. So it's essentially going through a hashing algorithm, all the PHI, and out is coming a token. So what that allows us to do is even if we collect data across different sources, we're able to link it for an individual person, even though there's no PHI in there. So that's a really powerful method. So what we're able to do is we're able to gather perhaps EHR data from one institution and claims data from another institution and link them so that we have one record per patient across time. And then the other type of data we have is identifiable data. So this is where we go direct to the source. We go to a hospital, and we have their EMR data, and only the physicians and the staff at that hospital are able to re-identify a patient in order to provide them an opportunity to get access into a clinical trial. So in other words, providers are able to use the information in their daily treatment operations, use cases for care of their patients. So both of these data sets together, we've built them around the world. We're in about 20 countries today, over 400 million lives, as I said, over 100 different hospitals. We're in countries, not just US and the other major markets, but we're also in Turkey, Brazil, Serbia, Croatia, Taiwan. We're just opening a site in Japan. We're opening in Australia. We're in Colombia. So we have one of the first global data sets of this scale that we're trying to use to help pharmaceutical companies recruit for the clinical trials around the world. And now that we have this data set at this scale, we're not just using it for this use case, but we're also using it to study disease and how disease differs across countries, how care paradigms differ. We're using it to study long-term safety in different populations. We're using it to essentially compare different therapies in different populations. So there's a lot of value that we're able to generate, not just for pharmaceutical customers, but also for government and other health organizations. So how do we address the privacy problem, which is obviously a huge one that we all should be concerned about? We have a federated network. So this network is such that no patient-level data actually leaves any individual hospital. So the care providers retain control of data. What happens is that on the left-hand side, a pharmaceutical customer or us enter in a clinical trial protocol that we're interested in finding patients for. So, for example, we're interested in finding multiple myeloma patients, this is a hot disease area, who have failed 4 prior lines of therapy, who haven't yet taken a new type of investigational therapy. So we'll code that protocol into our system. It'll send that protocol to the cloud, and the cloud then sends it to each individual hospital in our network, where we either have a cloud or a on-premise installation in those hospitals. All of those hospitals have different ways of coding their data. They have different data models. We've latched all of them to our data model so that we're able to send the same query to all of them and query them really within seconds instead of what was the status quo of being months. Each of those hospitals, the servers that are on-premise send back an aggregated number of patients that match that particular protocol, and then that's returned to the sponsor all the way on the left. So in other words, for that clinical trial protocol of how many multiple myeloma patients can I find, they get back an answer, maybe 70 patients. 5 in this hospital in Brazil, 5 in this hospital in Turkey, 10 at this site in the US, et cetera, et cetera. So this federated network allows us to keep any patient-level data in a hospital, and in particular, keep any PHI under the control of a physician and the patient themselves, and not allow any of it to go unnecessarily to a life sciences company. And addressing the final challenge of data quality, this is a persistent challenge. It's always going to be one. This is a case study in prostate cancer where we used both an EMR and a claims data set in order to study the long-term safety of a common therapy for prostate cancer. This is androgen deprivation therapy. It's a type of hormone therapy. So in the middle, you can actually see a Kaplan-Meier survival curve. This is the type of curve you use when you want to determine if there's a difference in some outcome between 2 different cohorts. So the orange one is essentially patients who have not taken hormone therapy, and the blue one is those who have taken hormone therapy. And what the y-axis is actually measuring is that those who are taking hormone therapy go on to develop dementia more often than those who don't, which was a previously unknown correlation or a long-term safety effect of this type of therapy. So in other words, we were able to use data set of this scale and this longitudinality across several years to study this type of an effect, which may not have been known or been obvious to researchers. We can replicate this type of a study across any set of comorbidities, and so to discover these patterns that we can then invest further research in. On the right-hand side, we then are able to, because we have this data set of this size, we're able to also break this down by different subclasses of therapy within that hormone therapy and show that there are 2 subclasses of therapy that have a more pronounced effect on the probability of developing dementia. So with a data set of this size, we're essentially able to say, okay, now let's do further research on these subclasses and see, are there certain long-term safety issues that we should be concerned about that physicians should be taking into account? One of the other reasons I brought this up is that in a data set of this size, there were surprisingly quite a few female patients, or rather our data set told us that there were patients labeled as female who had prostate cancer and took androgen deprivation therapy. So this is an example where there is, in some cases it could be true, but in most cases there is an error that could happen in so many different ways. Perhaps at the source, the gender was coded incorrectly in the claim. Perhaps the patient identified or purposely misidentified themselves. Perhaps the physician misidentified. Perhaps somewhere along the technological track of the claim coming from the source to our system, there was some error that miscoded. And so these types of errors are magnified, and we have to create very particular rules and ways to query our data to make sure that our data is making sense at various stages in the analysis. And this is one case where we essentially had to create several different types of rules in order to be sure that the cohort we were querying actually took a particular drug. There's another example that's common in the literature about rheumatoid arthritis, where only a third of the time that patients have a rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis in the data do they actually have the disease. And some of it is because the physician may still be figuring out the diagnosis. Some of it could be a classic misdiagnosis. It could be something else. Some of it could be because they billed and they wanted reimbursement for a particular procedure, and so they needed to put that code in. There's all sorts of issues in the system. So we need to create rules and queries such as, let's really try to find patients who have taken many drugs and be sure that they're rheumatoid arthritis patients so that we can study the right population. So those are a couple of the ways that we go around the data quality issue. That's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay. And finally, it's my privilege to request Kunal Shah to come and talk to us about your presentation on big societal impacts and the work that United Nations is doing. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Atham, for inviting me to be part of this panel, and Kamalika for setting up this topic of, actually that would be better, yeah. So I'm not here representing any organization. I'm not representing United Nations. I'm not representing any corporate organization or any entity. I'm here to kind of provide more of a, based on all the presentations which have happened today, which is very impressive. I almost feel like I don't belong here. It is amazing work that people have done. And how can we apply that for the global good? Some of these technologies, some of the innovations in engineering that we have just heard about, how can we take that? Am I moving the slides? Oh. How can we apply that to? Somehow it's moving, somebody's moving it. Okay. So anyway, how can we apply that to a global good, right? So I'm going to kind of phrase this in terms of, no, I think it's fine now. Just a quick kind of, just give you perspective that I come from a corporate background as an architect in a technology, information technology domain, various different industries, wearing my architecture hat. So what I'm doing now is putting my architecture hat, not necessarily just the technology architecture hat, but architecture hat in a larger sense to look at United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, right? Which is what United Nations came up with, from past learnings, and they started this initiative for a 15-year initiative, commencing in 2015, and the goal is to achieve about, as you will see in the next slide, 17 different goals, starting from, solving poverty, hunger issues, rise for hunger, or education, electricity, basic necessities, sanitation, right, across the world, and achieve these improvements within the span of 2015 to 2030. We are obviously halfway down there already, right? So, and just to give you, if you don't measure what we are doing, how do we know where we are? Are we making progress, right? So that's the key challenge that they are facing. How do you get all the participating, about 193 countries, to report on progress being made against those 17 goals, about, I believe, 169 targets and 232 indicators that they are measuring against, right? So what this slide is telling you is, in the past 7+ years, there are a lot of progress has been made. I'm not quoting everything here, but a lot of progress has been made, right? But there's so much more work left to be done. There are still about 2.3 billion people who don't have basic sanitation services, right? There are 892 people forced to practice, I don't mean to gross you out, open defecation, right? These are the types of issues that the world faces, and there's more work that needs to be done, and really kind of leverage the data revolution, all the technological growth and advancements that we are seeing, and cutting edge, we can apply to that, right? We generate about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day. 90% of the data that world has today, it's generated within the last 2 years, right? So think about that. Can we leverage that? Can we harness that to improve how we deliver, societal, benefits or services, and bring people up from where they are to a more respectable, more of peace and prosperity level, right? That's kind of what the goal for United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda is, right? So how do I kind of connect this to a data revolution, a data challenge, right? So if we think about what United Nations is trying to do, it's trying to get visibility into 193 participating countries and measures of these 232 indicators from each country being reported back to United Nations, right? And in order for the countries themselves to do this, they need to have wings all across, of course, through their governance efforts in the federal government level or the regional government, state government level, or at a district level or a local level. They need to collect this information. What David talked about in terms of edge computing, to the edge and back, right? That can be super useful in this type of scenarios where the humans are just people, citizens of the country, citizens in a state or a city. They're going through their lives, they're going through their life cycle, and they are, providing data at each point in time, every moment of our day. We are creating data on ourselves. Somebody is collecting it. If the government is collecting it, that can be used to, in the areas where these disadvantageous areas where, people are suffering or they have challenges, basic challenges. You want to bring medical treatment to a local village, let's say. I come from India. There are places where there is no water services, no sustainable or continuous electricity services, right? How do you collect data in those areas and still be able to, aggregate it at a higher level, always go from local to district to state to national level, and then ultimately at a United Nations level, right? That's what, just giving you an example here of how India did it in terms of setting up processes, and India actually set up India Digital Evolution Architecture to, not just to support this, but in general, and that comes in handy for reporting on what they call as voluntary national review that each nation conducts, providing information back to United Nations. And really the challenge is of, again, making sure that the government organizations, public sector, private sector, and social sector, they all have the collaboration capabilities and attitudes and alignment to be able to share data, share information, and bring it for, a better visibility into this progress towards sustainable development goals. I'm going a little fast here. But so I'm going to talk about some specific types of technologies which are being leveraged in many countries or some countries, but could be applicable in larger number of countries. In terms of situations where you may not have the ability to run, let's say, a digital platform on a continuous basis, right? You are running through, electricity challenges. You're running through bandwidth challenges if you're talking about mobile devices and mobile services, right? So what you may be able to apply here in the United States, it's not directly translatable to what you maybe apply in a village in India or village in some other country or a remote place. They have to do right fit for those circumstances. For example, Kenya, they have this service called M-Pesa, which is an SMS-based payment transfer service, right? And it was very useful for women in that country because their significant others would go away for work, and they won't come back for a long time, and they had no way of easily transferring money back to their family, right? So that was SMS has been around for a couple of decades now, right? And that was applied in a very productive way in Kenya. So it does not always have to be cutting edge technology that you need to apply. You may be applying 10, 20-year-old technology, but how you apply it for those given circumstances, that matters. As long as it makes a difference, it gives you the, provide the service to the local folks, and then, certainly kind of report the progress on the sustainable development goals that the government would have or the nation would have, right? So satellite technology is one such example, like geographical information systems, satellite Earth observations, having that, wide span of visibility on monitoring a certain area for either geographical conflicts or natural disasters, that is obviously being used. Wearable technology, smartwatches, certain monitors, jewelry, or various other things like a necklace, a digital necklace, which was used. I forget which country. I believe it was India, but I could be wrong. It was used as medical records. When a baby is born, or they are going through various different cycles of their life, in the toddler years or in their infancy years, the digital necklace was used for medical records. So everywhere they went, they were able to read from that necklace and get the medical records right away. I talked about M-Pesa already from a cellular technology, mobile banking, or payment transfer point of view. Some of the other things are, for example, you're looking at in the remote areas, or you're looking at transportation, right, and operations management, transportation planning, right? They have sensors, or they have continuous traffic monitoring sensors for monitoring speed, volume of traffic, safety. Those types of technologies are using smart cities, or even like mobile technologies on the buses, which are transporting people from one place to the other, right? Those are the types of technologies which have been applied in various countries. How can you take this and uniformly apply that across multiple countries? How can you help each individual nation to adopt these technologies? And really that takes time, right? That takes, it goes through various levels of maturity. So, in order for them to leapfrog and, be at parity with the rest of the nations, you have other countries helping them. United Nations has a program on capability building and skills building and helping out the countries who are fallen behind, or they are not up to the mark on, or I shouldn't say up to the mark, but not on the same level as the other nations in terms of technology adoption, digitization. How can we help them get there, right? That's the challenge that, I'm just here to kind of, suggest that there's something that all of us can do to contribute to that in our own way, right? So I talk about cross-sector collaboration, right? We talked about that. But I also feel like individual commitment, and if we measure ourselves, somebody said we have become data points. I would say, you said that, right? And I would say, we could become products, and we measure ourselves as products on how positively we are affecting the society, and what changes are we affecting through our actions and our involvement in the society itself, right? To work towards this larger goal of, this 17 different goals, whatever makes, sense for you, or whatever inspires you or motivates you. Each of us could make a difference. So I'm going to end it here and see if there are any questions, comments.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's the end of the panel. Let me see. Okay, I think I remember this right. From our panelists and the data that you shared, who could tell me how many tons of ice is melting per year? Any idea? It's a good trivia question. Our panelists and all of you. One guess. Think big numbers. $1.2 trillion tons of ice is melting per year. One other trivia. We were talking, Kunal, in your presentation, you talked about the big complex societal challenges that we have developed footprints and foundational architecture, but the context is different, so they cannot be applied necessarily in the same way because the context is also data that plays into the foundation. So when we think of world hunger, here's what, I am not an expert, but here's what I have read. There's enough food to feed the world. But what do you think is the number of undernourished people in the world as of last year or this year? Close number. Think big. It's not in trillions yet.
1.6 billion.
It's close to a billion. So I think it's like 850 million. And so when we think of these challenges, they need the research. David, when you talked about how the research is progressing, without EDGE, we cannot solve this challenge. And Kunal, you talked about the application of smartphone to get payments over. It solved a real-world problem. That is a real-world need. And Akshay, you talked about how healthcare is progressing. Some of the things we're doing in genomics and cancer treatment, those are life and death, right? That's what is available today. But I talked about, limitless possibility. When you think of the possibilities that lie at the intersection of science and research, applied at translational, and big thinking, and commitment to big thinking. And I hope our panelists were able to bring that out for you today. Any questions for the panel? I know we're running a little over time, but any questions? Otherwise, I know all of us are going to be here through lunch. Yes.
So from different applications and different perspectives, how important data integrity is, otherwise you can There is another related aspect of it, which is bias in the data. How do you differentiate or cross-validate the biases while keeping the data intact?
So maybe I can start. And when we're talking about very large data, we always have bias of not just those that created the data, but how we collect data. And we're often collecting noisy data, we have missing data, and that becomes a very challenging aspect of doing massive scale data analytics and ensuring the integrity of our data sets as well. In communities that I've worked with, it really is a forefront of thought on new algorithms that are able to still operate correctly given the bias and sort of missing parts of the data. As an example, in cybersecurity, often we're able to collect network traffic at the border into an organization, but we may not be able to see what happens inside of that organization. And so that's a certain type of bias. And we have also integrity, as there may be malicious actors as well, trying to inject false data into our sensors that we use to analyze for cybersecurity threats. So these are areas where I think we need new algorithms. There needs to be more focus on more resilient algorithms, higher fidelity algorithms, and ones that don't get rid of the bias. The bias will be there, but how do they still operate to their full proficiency given the issues that we have with the bias within those data sets and how they were collected.
So I agree with what David said. I would say, I think there was a discussion earlier about responsible AI as well, right? And, just building from what David said, my comment would be that the data science algorithms or the models that we prepare or, that we are leveraging, I'm going into the bias from the point of view of gender or sex or, region or that type of bias, not necessarily indirect bias from how we collect the data, but the actual data itself, right? Those need to be, in the same sense of the UN Sustainable Development Goals point of view. I would say that becomes critical because they look for disaggregated information. They don't want aggregated information. They want the scoring at an aggregated level, but they also want disaggregated information, which is essentially to say you may want to keep, it brings up the privacy issue, right? But you have to do this in a way that, let's say banking industry does credit scoring models, right? You could do that type of segmentation and, clustering and, those types of things from a scoring point of view, but you are not divulging that person's personal private information in any way, right? Or any one particular person for that matter. So I would say that is critical.
And then from my point of view, so I essentially work in data collection. You have to work hard to collect different sources of data to decrease the bias in your overall data set. So in clinical research, they often say a lot of the clinical trials, most of the data is coming from a small portion of the population that's not represented of the broader one. And just to be blunt, white males are overrepresented in clinical trials. Hispanics only make up like 1% of clinical trials. There's all these statistics out there that are pretty staggering. So for us, it was about collecting patient race and physician race and linking it to medical data and then guiding pharmaceutical companies to where they can find Hispanic patients that match their trials or Hispanic females of a certain age that match their trials. So we collect enough sources of data, enough different types of data to try to decrease as much as possible that type of inherent bias that's just so far has been manifested in the clinical research that's been done to date.
I'll say one. I was in at Dell Technology World in the year 2017 or 18, and one of the use cases they were sharing was self-driving cars in labs, and they were saying, the facial expression of the individual at the seat is instigating different actions to the cars. So imagine the data sets there, because how I'm Indian origin from Calcutta, female, certain age demographic, how my facial expression is during a moment of stress was probably different. So it puts into perspective this richness and robustness of data collection, and I appreciate you sharing that. You had a question.
I have been waiting.
Yeah, during lunch.
I can ask this individually at lunch, but it related to how useful perhaps new techniques like homomorphic encryption might be to allow you to help preserve privacy while opening the doors to new kinds of analyses.
Yeah, I can say that tokenization, hashing, creating unique identifiers, and then taking away PHI, like that family of techniques, it's opened up everything in the healthcare data industry, because before we had different silos and pockets of data, or we had to do things with lengthy IRBs and PHI and identified data that may be only done at like a single institution. But now we have a data set at such a scale. It's across thousands of healthcare institutions. We're able to link in, when necessary, EHR, genomic, imaging, pathology data. I'm able to bring in education, race, all this type of other social behavioral determinants of health data that I need in order to create a picture without invading anyone's privacy, and be able to actually study and take out important things like long-term safety that we looked at in that prostate cancer case study, and take out insights that can then fuel further research. So without that tokenization, like, it would have been very difficult. I mean, you can do these research studies at smaller scales, but you can't dig out these insights at the larger scale without that tokenization.
Well, I think we're at time. Thank you very much. You're a great panel. Appreciate Tom giving us this opportunity. Thank you again.
This was an amazing session. Thank you, Kamalika, David, Kunal, and Akshay for a great discussion and a great set of presentations. So taking the last part of the discussion and the segue, that how do you interface with the machines and the algorithms and the AI methods to correlate the outcomes to the application. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce the next very, very visionary and pioneer speaker, Dr. Ben Shneiderman. He's a distinguished university professor at the Department of Computer Science and a founding director of the Human-Computer Interaction Laboratory, a member of the Institute of Advanced Computer Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. I have to talk about a couple of things because we saw the two visionary presentations this morning, but Ben is in another dimension, great pioneer who has steered the field of the data revolution in order to create new labels, new standards, and new expectations, and a new horizon in human-computer interface. And the impact that can be seen from one, among many, but one indicator, which is the Google Scholar citation. So we talked about if somebody has 10,000, 12,000, Google Scholar citation, that means that, they have steered the direction of that particular field. Guess what? Dr. Schneider has 100,814 citations, 100,000. So that shows that the magnitude of the impact in this particular field. Dr. Schneider is a member of the National Academy of Engineers and also an elected fellow of the National Academy of Inventors. He is also the fellow of the Association of Computing and a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of the Sciences. So again, please join me in giving warm welcome, though virtually or remotely, Dr. Shneiderman. We have the audio issue. Just hold on, Dr. Shneiderman. Okay, are we good? We have more than our usual share of data and technology problem today. Okay. Yeah, can you hear us, Dr. Shneiderman? No. Uh, can can you text him? Okay. No, mute. Unmute. Oh. Can you unmute him? No. Can he hear us? You are still on mute. You need to unmute. Okay. Say something. You are. Yeah. Okay. We see you. Can you say something so that we can hear? Okay. Now we can hear you. Okay. Yes. Yes, we can see you, we can hear you, and you can start.
So it seems like it's fully automated. On the other hand, I became aware that there was another quadrant here on the upper left, which was human mastery. When I ride a bicycle, when I play a piano, when you work with children, you want to be entirely present. You don't want the machine and technology. Conveniently edit and share with the people they want. So it's a complete system that gives them what they want. It's their act of creativity. It's their work. The user interface has made it a successful story for them. And that's what we're looking at. The technologies that give high levels of human control, for reliable, safe, and trustworthy systems that have high levels of automation. Now, there are two dangers here. On the far right, we see the dangers of excessive automation, exemplified by the two crashes, the tragic crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX that killed 346 people. There, the designers believed that they could have such a fully automated system that the pilots were not even informed of its presence or its activation. And therefore, there was no obvious and easy way to turn it off. And so that's the kind of tragedy of excessive automation. Similarly, there's a danger of excessive human control. And so we have a long history in human factors engineering of design systems where we limit what people can do to prevent dangers. Now, a simple example is a self-cleaning oven in many kitchens, where if the temperature goes above 600 degrees Fahrenheit, the door is locked automatically to prevent the users from opening the door, which would be very dangerous. So there's a long history of developing these strategies of guardrails, of interlocks that prevent dangers. And we'll see how this plays out. So this is my tableau, and we'll take a look at one other example here, the application for patient pain control designs, patient-controlled analgesics. The great developments during World War II of morphine drip bags were so that a patient who was in great pain from an injury, a wound, or surgery would have a drip bag which would drip morphine at a regulated pace. Unfortunately, there were two dangers here. Too much morphine would kill the patient. Too little morphine would fail to relieve the pain. And so the computer control was put in to measure human heart rate and breathing rates so as to prevent excessive morphine. The problem of insufficient morphine was solved by patient-controlled analgesics, where the patient was given a trigger and they could squeeze and get more morphine. But there were guardrails or interlocks to prevent too many clicks that would be dangerous for the patient. The current designs of reliable, safe, and trustworthy systems are a combination of the patient-guided but clinician-monitored system where a hospital may have 30 or more of these devices, and a central control center will monitor the performance to see if any of them are failing, but collect the data about the performance so as to improve the algorithms for all patients, and to understand the special needs of young patients or older patients, or those with certain comorbidities. And so we see how this two-dimensional model opens up the possibilities of design. Sometimes we want high degrees of computer automation, sometimes we want high degrees of human control, sometimes we want both. And that's where the new thinking comes from. When we get the best of human control and the best of computer automation. The second point is the challenging one about design metaphors. This is a really difficult issue, and I propose that there are new ways we want to think about the language, metaphors that we use when we think about design. On the left, we see the familiar and traditional ones of intelligent agents, of computers as teammates, partners, or collaborators, the notion of autonomy or even assured autonomy, and the belief that social robots are inevitable. Don't share those beliefs, and I suggest there's a new language, maybe not as compelling, but important. I would suggest that AI-infused super tools are the way to think about the design of new technologies. And that telebots give us what we want in terms of remote control centers, supervising in aggregate many thousands of devices, and then active appliances that are common in households and other settings. So let's take a look at the examples. I've already given you my favorite of the digital camera, where the wide variety of controls let you design the photo you're going to take in advance, compose what you want, get the photo you want, edit, and then share. That's a rich blend of machine learning applications with human control. Similarly, navigation choices. Here I show a map that plots a course from the White House to the University of Maryland in College Park, just 8 miles away. And the machine learning algorithms give me opportunities. They give me choice. They give me previews. It shows 3 possible routes. There's one that goes through the city that has many stoplights, but it's the shortest distance. Alternatively, you can go around the city on the Beltway and take a longer trip, maybe more scenic, but maybe more gas consumption to get you there. And so it's still the user's choice, but the machine learning and AI algorithms provided the evidence and the information needed to help make a choice, including real-time information about bottlenecks and delays along the way. We see the same principles in smaller, familiar, widely used things, such as search tool, search query, auto completion. Here I start typing University of Maryland, and I get a set of options that remind me of features I may want to use, or I can ignore it and continue on my own. Similarly, spelling correction guides me in small ways by providing suggested improvements, which I can accept. More ambitious super tools are the Bloomberg Terminal. And here we see a large display which provides a tremendous volume of information. Bloomberg takes in 1.6 million articles per day, and the natural language processing algorithms, machine learning, cluster and organize this information, and then the results are presented tailored to the needs of each analyst and user. And so they may specify their interest in a particular industry, a particular country, or a particular company. And so they would get the information they want. The display is a well-designed one, which has tiled, non-overlap windows, and spatially stable arrangement, so that users with a glance can turn and get what they want very quickly and make decisions from it. And this kind of design needs 300,000 people to pay more than $20,000 a year to have this on their desk. It's that much of a powerful super tool. It empowers the user to make important decisions that are quite consequential. The telebot idea is maybe best exemplified by the NASA's Mars rovers. And if you talk to some people in the AI community, they'll tell you, oh yes, it's autonomous. It's autonomous. It avoids obstacles, it avoids precipices, it automatically turns its antenna to be optimal, it automatically turns the solar panels to get the best collection of energy. On the other hand, there are 80 people at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratories who operate these devices. And they have a different role, and they are working at a different time span. While the automation may happen on the millisecond, second, or even minute basis, the NASA and ground controllers are taking advantage of special opportunities. They're dealing with problems that occur on the Mars rover. And maybe most importantly, they're thinking of the designs that are necessary for the next generation of large robots. So that's the kind of combination we're going to get of high levels of automation for some operations, particularly the rapid performance ones, but human control over the decisions that can be carried out over minutes or hours. Another great example is of a telebot is the Da Vinci surgical system. And journalists and some writers are very eager to say, surgical robots do better than human surgeons. And the manufacturer tells us very clearly, robots don't perform surgery. Your surgeon performs surgery with Da Vinci by using instruments that he or she guides via a controller. And so this opportunity gives the surgeon very precise control deep inside human cavities to make very careful operations that really improve patient care, improve surgical outcomes, and speed recovery times. Because the incisions will be very small. These so-called keyhole incisions may reduce the recovery time and improve the outcomes. So here again, we have what we should think of as a telebot, a device that gives a human control over an automated system. The control center idea I've already talked about works in hospitals and other environments. Here at Counterterrorism Center, we see the information abundant display of data. We see people working together and collaborating. People are the teammates, the machines are the tools. And so that's the setup we want to encourage. The active appliances are increasingly propagating through households, from Google's Nest to the Roomba, and these devices have an increasing amount of machine learning and AI algorithms, but users are still in control of their dishwasher and their clothes dryers and the appliances in their house. But they have control. If they wish to turn up the heat in their oven to brown their chicken, they can do that. If they want to stop the dryer to remove the clothes, certain clothes that are more delicate, they can do that. So here we are, high degree of automation. The dishwasher, the clothes washer have all kinds of sensors built into them. They monitor the performance, they improve performance, and increasingly the manufacturers collect the data to improve the algorithms for all users. Other active appliances are now included a cardiac pacemaker, which earlier I suggested had to be autonomous. But newer devices give users controls on their home mobile devices, and then Medtronic, or the manufacturer, can monitor tens of thousands of these devices to collect the data about performance, to improve the machine learning algorithms for special cases of young people, older people, and people with certain comorbidities. So the active appliance is becoming a clear pattern where we have automation for certain aspects, but we give human control for other aspects. And the design game these days is to understand which things should be under human control and which things we can automate in a reliable, safe, and trustworthy way. The third part of this talk, I'll be brief about governance structures. There's quite a lot to think about as we move from taking research ideas and putting them into real-world practice. This diagram shows the 15 recommendations I make about the governance structures, which range from the narrow work of a small software engineering team, the larger group of an organization that they work in, which may have dozens of software engineering teams, to the larger industries, which may have dozens of corporations, and then the regulatory structures around it. I'll just be brief here. We'll focus on the team recommendations. And there are 5 of them in this category. I take a moment to encourage the idea of audit trails and analysis tools that, like the flight data recorders of that have made civil aviation so safe, the audit trails for every automated device will capture what happens, and so that when things go wrong, we have the data to do a retrospective analysis and then improve it. A related notion is the idea of incident reporting websites. We see this in the Food and Drug Administration's adverse event reporting system, which collects millions of reports from physicians, from clinicians, from pharmacists, from nurses, and from patients about what goes wrong with medical devices and with medical treatments. And so these ideas of capturing feedback to know what's going wrong and repair problems and minimize dangers become an essential part. I will focus just on one of these, the explainable user interfaces, and just suggest that the growth of interest in XAI, explainable user interfaces, is quite wonderful. But most of the attention goes to retrospective explanations, let's say 95%. I think there's another way, which you can see in the work of many people, Cynthia Root, maybe highlight, whose work on interpretable models gives you an alternative to explainability. She has a bold article that says, stop explaining AI black boxes and make the models interpret. My approach to this is to prevent the confusion and surprise by what I call prospective user interfaces, not retrospective. And these should be interactive, visual, and exploratory. Let me give a simple, modest example in a familiar toy case of a mortgage loan explanation. The user puts in how much of a loan they wish. They enter their monthly income, and then they put their assets, the liquid assets in. And they get a response that says, we're sorry, we were unable to grant you this loan. And it gives what's considered to be a pretty good explanation, because it says you need to reduce the amount you request for the loan, increase your monthly income, or increase your assets, possibly by borrowing money from the firm. This is seen as pretty good, but I think we can do better. My approach would suggest a prospective, interactive, visual user interface with a set of 3 sliders. If you change the amount of the loan you're requesting by moving that yellow triangle to the left, you get more blue. That increases your score to get closer to the green line of what you need to get approved for the loan. Similarly, if you move your monthly income to the right, increasing the monthly income, or increase your assets, then you will get more of the blue that gives you a better understanding. So this exploratory approach supports users in finding out, getting what they want. It's been put to work in a variety that is charming one by a group of British librarians that looks at a recommender for novels. And here you get to choose 4 sliders out of a dozen categories. And as you move the sliders left or right, the images of the covers change automatically. There's no question about why you got a certain recommendation. You know it's because of what you have put in and how you feel the slide. To make this easy, you have to have rather rapid performance of showing results within 160 milliseconds so that it's clear the causal nature of the user's movement will change the recommendation. Similarly, we see this in recommender control panels for music here. 5 of the Spotify attributes are used, and as the users shift danceability or other features of the music, they get to see different recommendations. So this strategy, I think, will become increasingly common. Giving users control is a familiar strategy towards competitive advantage in many applications. Your automobile may be the best example. When you get in, you can adjust the lights, you can adjust the mirrors, you can adjust the chair, you can adjust the temperature and the sound of the radio. You're in control. You get to make these arrangements. And so that becomes something very desired by consumers. And that's suggesting that user control is important. So, just to summarize, those are the governance structures. We can talk a lot more about building a safety culture that works from inside an organization, that has a pattern of hiring, of training, and of supporting a resilient organization to prevent danger, to respond to danger, and to recover more rapidly. The third oval about trustworthy certification includes particularly the independent oversight methods that come from external organizations. Many companies, many large technology companies, have excellent processes by which they build their application, their human-computer interaction and AI-based applications. But I think it's great that they do that, but also important is to have an independent external oversight. You may know that in the US, the Securities and Exchange Commission requires each publicly listed company to conduct an internal audit, but it also requires an external independent audit. And that's what we need for life-critical and consequential AI systems. Government regulation becomes another alternative. Some in industry thinks that government regulation limits innovation, but we know that that's not necessarily true. The history of automobile fuel efficiency and safety regulation has shown dramatically that it unleashes huge innovation that leads to competitive advantages for companies that develop new strategies for more fuel efficient and safer automobiles. Similarly, in recent years, European GDPR regulations triggered tens of thousands of papers about explainable AI because that GDPR required the idea of explainable. So that's the perspective I see. Okay, and just to summarize, there are three takeaway pictures. Remember the two-dimensional arrangement of the framework that shows you can have high levels of computer automation and high levels of human control that are designed into systems that can be reliable, safe, and trustworthy. We also are shifting the design metaphors from older ones, which suggest the machine being the one who does it, to the human, the person who's responsible for the action. And that's key. Responsibility is a great sharpener of design thinking. And the third takeaway are the governance structures from human-centered AI, from software engineering teams, to organizational strategies, to industry strategies, and government regulation. I tried to tell the story in my book on human-centered AI, and it shows the hierarchy of things. It begins with the UN Sustainable Development Goals that Kunal Shah showed us. The 17 goals, I think, are central. And we want to support human rights, we want to support social justice and human dignity. And that's key to it. We do this by supporting human self-efficacy, creativity, responsibility, and social connectedness. Those are the things we want to do. We do that in the underlying mechanisms of design support of reliable, safe, and trustworthy in ways that bring about the best design of systems. In every case, we need to remember, here on the left side, I show 5 of maybe 30 stakeholder categories: the researchers, the developers, policymakers, and the many categories of users. We have to remember we're designing for a wide range of diverse users, and we need to make sure we address them. At the same time, we have to always remember there are threats from malicious actors, cyber criminals, terrorists, and others who we wish to disrupt these systems. We have also the threat of bias from incompletely chosen data sets to train machine learning algorithms, and we have the ideas or the dangers of flawed software. So those are the things we seek to accomplish, the ways we want to do it, and the threats we face. I tried to tell the story in my book called Human-Centered AI, came out earlier this year, and I'm pleased it's gotten strong reviews. And the first one says it's the most important AI book. You didn't see this as an HCI book, it was AI, and it's the message to the AI community that I wanted to present. And then Forbes magazine had a strong recommendation because they saw it as a business manager's guide. And the appearance of that article pushed the book up to number 7 in Amazon's top AI books. So that was a big boost. So that book has gotten warm reception. I hope some of you will take a look at it for deeper guidance that covers the issues I've described in much greater detail. And so I close by saying, in an optimistic way, the future is human-centered. Please join our Google group, where a once-a-week note tells the story of what's happening. Join our Twitter account. Website has further information and a discount code for the publisher, Oxford University Press, is after them on the bottom of the screen. I'm pleased to make these slides available and hope the organizers will post them on the website. So that's my story. I'll end here, but happy to take questions. Thank you.
Very much. And many critical and very important issue, both from the technology side and also the societal acceptance and responsible use side that you mentioned. So we opened the forum for some couple of quick questions from the audience. Any question? Okay, so I'll ask one. So you mentioned about the human-centered AI and basically the message that the outcome of the AI algorithms or the use of the smart devices has to be taken responsibly, right? But it is the human nature that when they see the smart or the automation in any particular processes, they become dependent on it. They stop, thinking about the understanding for general, users, and many times even the educated and most sophisticated users forget about that. Nothing in the world has a 0 false positive rate, or something that is a perfect, decision-making process. We all do that in our daily lives, a risk management decision-making process, which we don't usually replicate and are unable to replicate for the right reasons, because the operating conditions and the value proposition between the risk and the benefits will change. So given the same question, we may answer 2 different times in 2 different ways, depending on what the proposition is and what the operating conditions are there. Okay, you can do that to a certain extent and program that into the smart algorithms, but the general user does not know what is the sensitivity and the specificity analysis is. So they tend to compare, and that is not a fair comparison, because human decision-making process is always not numerically analyzed, because who knows how many times this particular doctor make the wrong diagnosis or any particular thing. But when you depend on any computer-aided or decision-making process through the smart algorithms, you want that to be perfect. Or even if you are told that, okay, the final decision is made by human, you tend to rely more and more on that. So where do you see in the future this particular gray area converging, the responsibility versus dependency?
Thank you for your
much again for insightful talk and your answer. So you have a great day. All right, so we come to the closer of this particular workshop, and now we have two announcements over here. The one is the lunch is waiting in the ballroom B area, and I would encourage you to pick up the lunch and network together. We have a great group of representatives from faculty, staff, and students. Some of the things that you heard today would be insightful in your discussion, but more importantly, network and let people know that everyone in this particular room is a resource, has certain expertise, has a certain role to play in collaborative research and partnership. And in today's world, the ideas are generated, and the collaborative research and the partnerships, create the impact for any innovation translation to the market. So we have a showcase, that's the second announcement, on the AI-related research in the area of cybersecurity, data analytics, VR, AR, from our faculty research institutes and also the New Jersey Innovation Institutes. So I would encourage you, while you are networking session for the next hour, introduce yourself to each other, network with each other, and come over the area and talk to the presenters. So hope that this day has brought to you additional information about the NJIT research enterprise, but also the quest for developing responsible, trustworthy, and reliable data revolution-based technologies in order to improve our lives, as well as to address the scientific and the technological needs, making both societal as well as the economical impact at the global level. So thank you again for joining us, and I wish you a very good day. One more thing, I would like to thank all of our distinguished speakers, Mike Doyle, Elizabeth Doherty, she just left for another one, and the panelist Kamalika Sandel, David Bader, Kunal Shah, and Akshay Dhawan, as well as those who have been working very hard in order to make this particular event happen. Amber Evans, on the back over there, and Kimberly Dripchak, and also the work study students and the members of the media services and staff. Thank you all very much. Thank you, and have a great lunch.